First things first, Charlie. How are you?
I'm very good, very good. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm not too bad, not too bad. Before we get into the new record, I'd like to jump back a little bit to the ending of the previous kind of album cycle because it was well
Mm.
received. You did a great deal of touring. Where was the band and yourself in particular in terms of your mindset at the end of that?
Well, I think this sort of a lot of this record is about the mindset after the touring finished. I think restless would be a good word to summarize how you felt when you came back from touring. Sort of searching for this constant cause for a celebration like you have when you're on the road.
Mm.
After a show, you can celebrate. When you have a day off, you can celebrate. And when you come back and you're not touring and you're just sort of back in sort of normality, quote unquote, there's not always a cause for celebration, and it can be pretty damaging if you're always seeking one out.
But
As I tried and tested.
That's an interesting point. Is it difficult to, because life on the road, I mean, I've never been a musician, but I can imagine life on the road is quite different than just regular life. Is it difficult to adjust? Not just in terms of seeking that high of a show, but just in general, kind of connecting with people and
Yeah, I think it is massively, but it's also it's weird that this record is coming out now because I think there are a lot of themes that sort of resonate with experiences people might have had. I mean, you know, to say that, it is about my experiences coming back from tour, but I think that would kind of, that would make it quite a unique experience. Do you know what I mean? It might
sure.
not, that's quite sort of separating it from a large amount of people who, haven't ever experienced that. I think what it's mainly about is just coming to terms with enjoying your own company,
Mm.
and being on your own and learning to separate what your work life might be from what your personal life is, and learning sort of what makes up your identity. And I think that's quite interesting how it's sort of coming out, and that was what I sort of faced coming out of touring. And
Right.
now in the past year, it's that's sort of quite similar to a lot of things I'm sure most people would have dealt with.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think, especially in your 20s, it's always this period of kind of adjusting or kind of figuring out what life really is about. And I wrote this line down from Water in the Well. We all got lost somehow. I tried to find myself, but I lost the map. So is that kind of how you found yourself when you were trying to kind of get back to normalcy?
Yeah,
Or
I think I just felt sort of a bit sort of lost. I mean, like, I think when we were on the road as well, sort of the normal life experiences that happen to you sort of at the age of 20 or 21 or whatever, or 19 would happen, but, like, heartbreak and stuff like that. But because you're on the road, you're able to kind of distract yourself from it. You're able to distract yourself from reality for a long period of time. And, this is why a lot of the sort of the title sort of revolves around my bedroom at the nursing home that I used to live in, because sort of when you come back and when you're in your bedroom, I really do think that there can be nothing more intimidating than when you fear your own company, because that is the place where you have no choice but to confront yourself when you go to sleep. And that's why initially you might sort of like, I sort of went out drinking a lot because, you go to sleep like that. But it was sort of like, you're forced to, I would have these vivid dreams and you're sort of forced to confront your own subconscious. And I think it's interesting how most people I speak to now sort of having this quarter life crisis. I don't know whether that's just sort of in London, but everyone sort of feels this sort of like existential, breakdown of just sort of who they want to be, what they want to do, will they ever be able to, achieve these goals? And it's hard. I think it's really hard for people because there's so much uncertainty at the moment, and there's a lot of sort of pressures as well. But I think for me in particular, sort of like I've just learned from lockdown, and I think hopefully this is as this is expressed on the record as well. This sort of necessity for positive thinking in order to kind of survive. You can't live in hindsight. You can't live in heartbreak or whatever. You have to confront them. that's what I'm trying to say. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But you have to confront them in order to get over them, and sort of enjoy this time and not think about what could have been, because it's hard at the moment with mental health and everything like that.
Sure.
But there is a lot of stuff to be grateful for still, and I think that and a lot of things we've learned is about the support of each other and of sort of all of these causes that have been going on, rightful causes. I think, yeah, I think identity is a large part of this record, and I think it seems to be a large part of our generation as to working out who we actually are.
In terms of identity, because one thing I hear from musicians is that, well, you're in a band. I imagine you've been playing music for a very, very long time. That their identity is almost kind of linked to that linked to them being a musician. That's kind of their identity, and once that is taken away, like for instance now when you can't tour, and obviously you can still be creative, but that identity becomes somewhat jarred. Have you experienced this as well, that it's difficult to see yourself outside of kind of the band?
Yeah, and that was what I meant earlier on when I was,
Okay.
like, no, completely, like finding this separation between your work and who you are as a person. And with my work, it was like shame and touring and
Mm.
promo and stuff like that. And then I didn't, we were so young when we sort of went on the road that we sort of missed out. We were sort of like tourists in our adolescence,
Mm.
like sort of coming in and out. And so a lot of sort of life experiences we might have had were sort of juxtaposed by this absurd lifestyle we were living. And I think massively it is, but because at that moment in time, you're trying to work out who you are anyway. And when you become too absolved with your work, or, enveloped by this character or persona or whatever, or, just only being in one world, you can kind of sort of like lose sight of a lot of relativity of what sort of matters. And, yeah.
Well, quickly before we continue then, what for you was one of the most surreal or kind of outer body type experiences you've had in the last couple of years?
I mean, most notably, like I remember when we stopped touring, when we did, those 2 years, we did the Songs of Praise tour. We came back. I moved into my flat, moved into that pink room, and then I remember like one of the early days I was there, because I moved in quite immediately after we
Mhm.
finished touring in sort of very beginning of January last year. And I remember I woke up sort of like 11, went to Tesco's, came back, cooked lunch, watched TV, and then I made some dinner and I kept watching TV. And my flatmate came back, and I was like, mate, you wouldn't fucking believe the day I've had. I've had the weirdest day in the world. I was just like, I went to the shops, came back, I cooked some food, I'm watching TV. And he was like, it's just a normal day, mate. I couldn't sort of like, I was so sort of like, lost like with sort of like these normal routines, and they seem quite like
Mm.
absurd to me, because when you're on the road, your every day is sort of mapped out for you by a tour manager.
Sure.
The hours are, do you know what I mean? Your lobby call, then how long the drive takes, then the sound check, then the gig, and then where you stay every day. And so to sort of have this kind of form of control again, kind of like lost as to what to do. And again, I sort of felt this kind of like restlessness where I was like, should I get on a train to Brighton, or should I do this? Do you know what I mean? You're always looking for an
Mm.
excuse for some ridiculous thing to do, which is as well kind of like, trying to escape yourself, trying to just not be in your own company for a period of time. But luckily sort of it lasted probably like 2 months like that, and then I sort of like got into it, and now I like heavily enjoy and really value and appreciate the time I can chill, but also I'm so grateful for the time we had touring.
And like you say, it's important also to focus on the positive things. How did creativity help with kind of making sense of all of this and the fact that you had this band as an outlet?
I think, I mean, it's all, we are so privileged and so fortunate to have any, to have our creative outlet as our profession, and that we can do it all the time. And for me, I think, and for all of us, it's always been necessity. And I think in particular with like writing lyrics, it's quite strange because most of the time I feel you're quite unaware of how you're actually feeling, and what you're writing down is actually the truth, you know, your true self. And you don't sort of realize this until you come back to it a few months later. You know, it's sort of a way to sort of, you know, put part of yourself down, you know, like sort of leave a sort of footprint of truth, and then sort of be able to walk away from it and sing it and stuff like that. But, you know, it's I think it's always helpful. I think, you know, people can hit like writer's block, and people can have sort of, you know, moments where they lack inspiration. But I think, you know, all in all, it's, you know, it's a form of sanity. And I think like when you do it for, you know, like in lockdown and stuff, and we're still doing it with no hope of touring, or, you know, maybe like, you know, financial stability or anything like that. And that's when you realize how much you actually love it and how important it is to you.
Can we take one of the songs that ended up on the record, and perhaps the one that's maybe surprised yourself the most? Like you say, maybe something you wrote, and when you revisited that song, you kind of were surprised by what you wrote. Was there one that stuck out?
I think maybe like Human for a Minute. I think, you know, that's like a very personal song, and sort of like I sort of want, you know, on this record it's very introverted, and sort of like I wanted the challenge of like exposing myself, because before anybody else hears it, the band hears it, and, you know, like they all know the context of everything I'm talking about. And so it's quite daunting and quite intimidating, like anyone would be, to come to 4 people you're very close with and sort of like read this out, or sort of sing it in front of them, and them will be aware of it. You know, it's quite sort of challenging, and I sort of like wanted that challenge. And I think sort of like at that time, you know, that song is sort of about being in this sort of like doomed relationship of like getting back together and then breaking up, and getting back together and breaking up, and sort of is about that sort of like delusion, the sort of the joy you have in the delusion when you think that it's not going to end, but then inevitably it does collapse. But, you know, I think like that was probably one of them. Yeah.
Okay, and on the musical side then, because that song in particular kind of sticks out. There's a couple somewhat slower songs at the end of the album as well, but that one, you use your voice differently. And so what was your approach with that song then?
Well, so it's very different to how that song was very different to how it used to be. That was the first song we wrote after Songs of Praise, and again, sort of became almost like a blueprint lyrically for me, you know, with the theme of identity and heartbreak or whatever we have that continues throughout the rest of the record. And we came in to record that in Le Fret, and James Ford, that was one that he probably had the largest influence on. And we played it in its previous form, and he sort of said, I don't think this is quite up to scratch. You know, that's a polite way of how he said it. And so then it happened very quickly, but we just sort of, Josh changed the bass line, and then we slowed it down, and we did a few other things. I'm saying we, I didn't actually do any of that, but and it sort of became this new thing, and sort of like suited the entire vibe of what we were trying to convey with that song a lot better, you know, and it sort of really worked. I'm really happy about how it came out. I know it's like Josh's favorite song on the record.
Okay. And when you're doing these kind of things, when you're changing the sound of the band a little bit here and there, you're experimenting and both lyrically and sonically, and in the back of your mind, obviously, you had a very successful record in Songs of Praise. So did that play a role in terms of where you wanted to go with the record? Did it add pressure of any kind?
I think it naturally sort of like there are always going to be pressures, but I think that, and you know, there's sort of a moment where you listen back to sort of like the ideas that you've come up with, and you have this sort of, you're proud of them basically. And I think that's the moment when any sort of external criticism that you sort of fear or whatever kind of slips away. And it might sound cheesy as fuck, but it was just true in my case. Like, you know what I mean? And then you sort of realize that no matter what, you're sort of happy and you're proud of what you've done. And we couldn't have done a carbon copy of Songs of Praise. We could only sort of do this, and I'm sort of really happy with what we've done and really proud of it. And I think you know, it's just like, I think everything I might think about is just how we perform the songs live. You know, and that's sort of an immediate reaction you can get with the crowd to see whether they like a song or not, or how they react to it. And I think that will always exist, but I think that's quite a nice way to think about a song, because then you're sort of like including sort of like the fan base or whoever's in the crowd in the sort of concept of the writing experience.
You mentioned something interesting because, well, earlier you said this sort of necessity to create and how it's very, very helpful to have that outlet in terms of playing live then, and especially now that that is no longer possible. And I saw you were about to do, are you thinking about doing a socially distant tour in next year?
Most of the dates are sold out for that already. Yeah.
Because I've seen footage of your live, and it's a very energetic show. There's a lot of direct feedback or connection with the crowd. Now that the crowd is only 30 people sitting down with masks on, how do you anticipate that element of your?
Well, going back to what I said previously about sort of like, you know, this kind of survival thing and sort of looking at things positively, I think we just have to be sort of, you know, grateful that we're able to play a show at all, and that we will sort of adapt and we will adjust. And we did a secret socially distant show at the Windmill in Brixton about a month ago, and it was definitely weird. It was definitely strange. Like, I can't deny that, but you know, it was to be able to perform again at all, you know, even though there might be some limitations and sort of rules and stuff, was just incredible. And so I think it's just sort of like pushing forward and doing whatever we can do under the circumstances.
Mm. You mentioned the Windmill. Now, I've talked with a couple of artists for whom that was a prominent place. I believe Goat Girl was one of them.
Yeah.
How important are venues like that, and especially these days because they're obviously struggling amongst all of this? How important are places like that for bands like you?
I mean, I think that they're arguably like one of the most important things. I think they are sort of where any sort of creative person are able to sort of, you know, hone their craft and sort of garner sort of greater knowledge and experience of what they're doing and what they want to achieve. And I think, you know, they're like pillars of culture. I think without them, I don't have much sort of hope for much things, but I think they will survive because they're a necessity to survive, and they give so much to so many people.
What is one thing you can share? It doesn't have to be particularly about that place, but something that you've learned, especially early on, about kind of perhaps not just the industry, but about being a touring musician, about going into this life, so to say.
You learn that not everybody gives a shit about you. You know, it's true. You know, it's like we played for years of these shows where it's just like over and over again to 5 people or 6 people or 7 people in all these independent venues. And that's a great thing to learn because it's fucking important. Like, you know, and it sort of drives you further to want to convince people and want to sort of get them on your side. And in terms of performance and stuff, it's kind of, you know, it's where you cut your teeth or whatever. It's you learn all the mistakes you're going to make, and you learn how to sort of, you know, avoid them, or what you should do if they do happen, or, you know, that not everything, you learn sort of that not ever, you know, that things aren't perfect, and that there's always going to be a bit of a struggle with either getting the sound or whatever, which again makes you so grateful when you do get to a venue that has all these sort of luxuries for you. But it's sort of, yeah.
And I was going to say, that does it help keep you grounded in a sense that knowing that success isn't given, that is something you have to work for, but also something, if you make that a goal, that it's kind of a fool's errand in a way?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think, you know, I think everybody's sort of path is different to sort of what they want to achieve. But for us, do you know what I mean? It was all very unexpected, but we knew we liked to play live. And so that was just what we did, just over and over again. And I think, you know, it just makes it all the more meaningful when sort of, you know, you play a show and then 50 people come, and then 100 people come, and then, you know, eventually like 1,000 people come, and 2,000 people or whatever. And then sort of it makes all those experiences more sort of, you know, not understanding, just sort of like meaningful, I guess.
Final question then. What do you hope, because we kind of talked about the themes and everything What do you hope that people will take away from the record after hearing it?
I don't know. I think their own interpretation. I think just sort of like, I don't really know. I don't want to sort of impose anything on anyone, or not that I'm necessarily going to, but just that, I don't know, just that it makes them sort of brings them a bit of joy, I guess.
Well, let me ask you slightly differently. What did you take away now that the album is done and everything kind of is going to be released, and what have you kind of taken away from this process now?
I think just gratitude that we've even been in this position. We're even fortunate enough to be in the position of being on our second record, and I think sort of pride. I'm sort of like I'm really happy with what we've achieved, and if people don't like it, then oh well.
Oh yeah, what else can you do?
What else can you do? Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk with me. Hope everything goes well with the record and the tour, and hopefully you get to tour properly in not too long as well.
Thank you very much, Robin, mate. Much love, brother.
All right. Have a good one.
Speak soon. Bye, mate. Thank you.
Bye.